Now, when we get to the last section, we've got the idea that he wanted to grow up and plough, to close one eye, stiffen my arm. All I ever did was follow. So he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. He really looked up to him, but there's real disappointment in his tone here. He lacked the skill to follow his father. And instead, of course, he became a poet. And an extremely successful, world-famous poet. There's certainly the sense that he really wanted to follow his father, and Heaney uses this here, uses the enjambment, all I ever did was follow, to sort of leave a pause after follow, which really emphasises that word, which is the key to the whole poem. Of course, it's the title of the poem. That I could never live up to him. In fact, I could only ever follow in his broad shadow. Yet another one of these images, which literally just means his actual shadow around the farm. He was always standing in his shadow, but of course, metaphorically, indicating his immense presence that he was walking under all the time when he was on the farm, and symbolically the idea that his father, and perhaps all fathers, are such an enormous presence that we can only ever follow them, according to Heaney. And actually, by using shadow, it's not exactly a necessarily positive word either. So there's almost slightly darker sense there, which brings us now to the last section of the poem. Because here he's saying, I was a nuisance, tripping, falling, yapping always. And here we've moved from all I ever did was follow in his broad shadow round the farm. Now we've got, I was a nuisance. I was a nuisance, tripping, falling, yapping always. We've moved away from the iambic rhythm we had earlier. All I ever did was follow, to now something called a trochaic rhythm. We've now got a trochaic rhythm. Briefly, with these three verbs, tripping, falling, yapping always. Trochees are tripping, falling, yapping. It's the stress on the first syllable, and then the next one is unstressed, and that's the pattern. This change indicates a switch in their relationship. In fact, sort of subtly preempts that what's coming in the last part of the poem, because in those final lines, everything's reversed. Today it is my father who keeps stumbling behind me and will not go away. There's an uneven rhythm towards the end of the poem there. which maybe suggests kind of awkwardness in the new relationship they have. And I find this last line really quite uncomfortable. It is my father who keeps stumbling and will not go away. The idea of old age, his father's falling down and will not go away. This sense that as his father follows him, he feels irritated by him, and actually he's really uncomfortable when he faces that truth. He lacks his father's patience when he's dealing with the old man who is now his father. And yet his father was so patient with him when he was a little boy, falling all over the place and getting in the way when he was trying to do his work. So overall, this poem explores the universal idea of roles reversing, between parents and their children, which is inevitable, of course. That cyclical idea that we've looked at in other poems. But there's also, in this poem, that very personal tension for Heaney. The idea that he chose a different path from his family. And you would think you couldn't get two more different careers than being a poet and being a farmer. And yet what Heaney's doing here, and actually in several of his other poems, he is exploring this idea that actually they are both careers that involve huge expertise and artistry. Tries to resolve this tension for himself by presenting farming, in this case driving the horse plough, presenting farming as an art form. And yet what he does when he presents it as an art form is he reveals his own incredible poetic skill in presenting what his father's doing on the farm through language. And so he attempts to resolve this tension. Maybe he achieves that resolution. Maybe you think he's trying a bit too hard here to demonstrate that respect for his father's career path over his own, or maybe you think genuinely he really looks up to his father, and that would be entirely down to you to make that interpretation.